Humanitarian intervention against genocide. Today we're going to see things differently and try to understand why certain things happened the way they did. Genocide. Why does genocide happen? Justifying the anti-genocide norm, changing legal practices, justifying humanitarian intervention, mixed motives and the problem of consistency, politics and the authority to intervene, and then we're going to judge the Kosovo intervention. Genocide is the killing of a large group of people, mainly coming from a specific nation or ethnic group. Genocide by the 1948 Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Genocide is the act that committed with the intent to destroy in whole or part of a nation, ethnic, religious group. Why does genocide happen? Genocide didn't stop at the 1.5 million Armenians' death, neither after the 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Our world is full of mass killings, and there's no sign of stopping that. Genocide doesn't follow a certain geographical boundary, neither a certain race. Anyone and everyone around the world could be threatened by genocide. If you go back centuries, they would tell you that they had some transatlantic slave trade that many people had considered as genocide, as an act of genocide, but they were ignored and they didn't have any help. But why does genocide actually happen? Aren't we human beings considered the most civilized and intelligent species around the world? Why do we turn into mass murderers? We have to understand that genocide doesn't just happen. It is actually prepared for, and people have certain conditions like social, political, and economic. It is triggered by events, however, not one event. It's the latter of events over time that lead a certain group or people to act the crime of genocide. However, it is actually an excuse to do that inhuman act. Then we have the 10 stages of genocide: classification, symbolization, discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, extermination, and denial, which help us understand why genocide actually happens. Justifying the anti-genocide norm. Many mass killings that happened and are going to happen do not meet the legal definition of genocide and shouldn't be considered a crime of genocide. For example, the Khmer Rouge, which had political reasons. Also, there are many humanitarian crises like Somalia in 1992, where a lot of suffering happened, but it was unintentional and it shouldn't be considered a crime against genocide. The nice thing is that the international law and other national legal systems actually provide greater protection for racial and ethnic discrimination rather than political discrimination. And they said that they're going to treat mass killings as mass killings no matter the reason. We have to understand that if we speak morally and we try to understand things, intervention against genocide isn't problematic and it should be done. John Rawls distinguishes comprehensive religion, philosophical, moral doctrines from political conceptions of justice. However, we also have an overlapping of consensus, which today is only about genocide. Okay, let me ask you this. If today you saw someone getting beat up on the street, wouldn't you directly go and try to help that person? You wouldn't stand the idea of letting someone getting hurt in front of you. It doesn't matter what kind of religion you believe in or where you come from, you would directly help that person. So imagine it is a mass killing. It doesn't matter what moral theory you believe in, one wouldn't be able to stand that idea of happening. We are aware that all humans have the right of human rights. And human rights focuses on the idea that humans should have a life of dignity, meaning no one should really have to suffer through genocide. Today, as we said, we have an absence of overlapping consensus only for genocide. If you speak politically and legally, the restriction to genocide is related to the state's sovereignty. And the state's sovereignty remains the central international law and politics, meaning that each state wants to enjoy their international rights, and which makes intervention against genocide more difficult because we aren't able to access countries if the country doesn't allow us to enter. Changing legal practices. The reasons many crimes happened before aren't the same reasons are happening today. So before, the way they were punished isn't the same way that people are punished today. Before the Genocide Convention, they did the enforcement through trial before a competent tribunal of the state in which and the territory of which the crime was committed. Before the 1990s, there was no right to intervene against genocide. People couldn't do anything. Today, we have the ad hoc and the permanent international criminal tribunal that work against the crimes of genocide. There are certain debates going on whether when and why human intervention can be done and why it should be done. We have something known as the collective humanitarian intervention, which they discuss, and if it's authorized by the UN, they can meet and talk about things without having any disagreements. During the Cold War, people didn't see the genocide as a threat of peace and security because they were focusing on other things and trouble going around the world. However, Friedrich Kriege said that the Security Council didn't know what they saw as a threat for peace and didn't know what they could claim to be the international set of peace. We have to understand that everything that isn't authorized by the Security Council is illegal, and many things that happen or happened were considered illegal because they weren't authorized by the Security Council. There are certain problems that come with the humanitarian intervention, and to understand those problems, we have to understand many norms and claims of both sides that contradict each other. If we're talking about Kosovo right now, during the intervention, during the that happened in Kosovo, the Council refused to intervene in Kosovo, and later the UN, when it was too late, they felt ashamed because they didn't intervene at the right moment. However, NATO intervened, and they said they didn't want to do the same mistake they did in Rwanda, and they didn't listen to the Security Council and didn't even ask for their authorization, and they did what was right. So at the end, the result was their action was illegal, but it was legitimate because it helped others. Justifying humanitarian intervention. Do we really need to justify humanitarian intervention? Isn't it something within us that doesn't need justification? It is our moral duty to protect each other, to protect human beings, to protect humanity. Actually, states have legal obligation to intervene against large-scale human abuse taking place. The contested justification is if you have two standards that will result into having two different directions. While positive authorization is all sides have to be satisfied, meaning if A forbids an action taking place, an intervention taking place, B will allow it. Obviously, A will win over B. But what they can do is they can work together in a sense that the result will be both justified and unjustified by the Security Council. Many things, many interventions can be legally forbidden, but can be morally accepted and understood and could be practiced without questioning. We have to understand things that many interventions aren't allowed but are somehow excused. Example, if we see a father who steals to feed their family. We understand that his act is illegal, but it's somehow justified because he needs to feed his family and provide them with food. To understand the excusable acts more, it is the things that we actually have sympathy for, the things that make us feel, the things that we can't handle because of our emotions. In order for not get into many complications, what they did is a certain list or created certain criteria that don't actually say what things are justifiable, that make you consider and help you to understand what things could be justifiable. Okay, mixed motives and the problem of consistency. A lot of conflicts arise when the interveners see things differently and they have different reasons to intervene. For example, a lot of states see the prevention and to stop and to punish genocide as their national interest. They want to work against the crime of genocide for the national benefit rather than the real reason they should be working on. Sometimes political motives contradict and come in conflict with moral and legal norms, which actually doesn't always happen, but sometimes it's that case happens. We have to balance the competing motives to have a good result and to eliminate the threat. If you want to judge an intervention, we have to take the humanitarian motive into consideration to judge the intervention. However, sometimes we have non-humanitarian motives, but the result turns out to be justified. Okay, we have something known as mixed motives, which is actually a selectivity act, meaning that a certain country didn't choose to intervene in A, but chose to intervene in B. But actually, A and B are both similar, so the intervention in B turns out to be unjustified. However, many debates and results turned against that problem, and they said that if a person acted bad in the past, meaning they ignored A and they decided not to ignore B, they shouldn't be held at that against them because people change and situations change and many people grow out of things. We have to also understand things that some states actually support genocide. When does that happen? The states that actually support genocide is when a certain state, friend, ally, or they have certain communication with that state that is acting a crime against genocide, they wouldn't try to intervene and they wouldn't try to stop it. However, if a state knows that their enemy is committing a crime against genocide, they would do the impossible to go against that state and destroy it. Also, we have to understand that political reasons, they actually lack human motives, humanitarian motives, and they don't come from humanitarian reasons. Politics and the authority to intervene. We actually have problems with authority to intervene because, like the Security Council, who has legal authority to intervene, doesn't really exercise it, while NATO, who doesn't have the legal authority to intervene, has the capability to intervene and actually tries to do something. Okay, we have to understand that when we have greater powers working alone, they actually are involved into more anti-humanitarian interventions rather than humanitarian interventions. That's why many prefer multilateral intervention rather than unilateral intervention. We are aware that order, security, and justice cannot be separated from the state, which from the state power, which can be seen as something good or something evil, which makes intervention a selfish national interest of the state. Authority of the intervening state is like a highwayman, while action can be seen as a policeman, when the state or a group of interveners act as a de facto representatives of the victims. Single states can act on behalf of other states, meaning they could work on helping other states for moral and political commitments and trying to protect those states. We have to keep in mind that the agreement or the approval of the Security Council is important. It isn't the only important thing, but it's actually important. Meaning, if we try to develop a doctrine of humanitarian intervention without the authorization of the Security Council, no matter what the moral attraction actually is, it isn't smart. It would really cause problems and conflict. Sometimes the result would turn out to be good, meaning we actually did help a country. We actually changed the country. We actually could stop the genocide from happening, but there would be consequences because we didn't have the Security Council agreement, meaning we actually got involved or entered the borders of countries that we weren't allowed to enter. Having understood all the previous information, why certain things were done, why many things couldn't have happened, why many interventions did take place, why many interventions didn't take place, and understanding all the facts, we have to judge the Kosovo intervention. Okay, let us give NATO our favor in intervention. Let us be with NATO in intervening in Kosovo. And let's say that genocide was really under its way and genocide was happening. If we want to move to the Security Council and understanding the Security Council's actions were blocked. The Security Council actually couldn't do anything. They couldn't even authorize the intervention. Why? Because Russia and China objected the intervention in the UN. They didn't want to intervene in Kosovo and they didn't want to help them. Another thing that Russia did, it had some selfish political interest with Serbia that made them not wanting to intervene in Kosovo, which made us move to the EU. The EU had also been blocked and had some legal and political constraints that didn't allow them to intervene and do something against the crime of genocide happening in Kosovo, which made us move to the United States, which they wanted to intervene and they wanted to help. But as we previously said, that unilateral intervention isn't favored and unilateral intervention isn't accepted. They would rather prefer multilateral intervention. The United States wasn't no help. What they did then, the United States, Britain, and Western European states couldn't accept the fact that genocide is happening in Kosovo. They couldn't stand the idea that people are gonna die and the things are gonna happen in Kosovo, and they're just gonna stand there and not do anything. So the best thing they decided that NATO should intervene because NATO can be seen as excusable and tolerable, and the intervention wouldn't be as bad as the other states intervening and they having being blocked. Obviously, the NATO, obviously NATO was aware of their actions. They were aware of everything happening, and they were aware of the consequences that they will face entering or making an intervention in Kosovo without having authorization by the UN, without asking anyone, just working on themselves. But they had the self-justification and they were aware of everything, and they still didn't mind happening. So during that time, the United States was acting as the hegemon in the NATO and helping, and what they did was a normative authorization, and they helped Kosovo in the way they did, in the way they could, and if things turned out good actually, meaning for NATO and their consequences. This was our presentation today about the humanitarian intervention against genocide. I hope you liked it and I made you understand certain things and new ideas and concepts. Thank you.